Alright guys, what's up? Pretty cool video today. I'm here with Jeremiah at Wilde Arrow Archery in Utah. This is the local bow shop I've come to for quite a few years now, but I'm in a new bow. This is a PRIME Inline 5. We're going to show you a full setup that I'm going with, kind of break down how we set it up, why we went with the accessories and the build that we did, and walk you through that process. So I'll let Jeremiah take over.
Okay guys, so what we've got here, we built Martin a new bow, and hopefully he'll put this thing to good work this fall for us here, man. So
that's the goal.
Yeah, we've already got the initial setup done. We've installed a lot of his accessories, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go through, break down kind of his initial setup. We're going to double check a lot of things today. What a lot of guys miss out on is, especially for, if you're new into the sport, is new bows, they go through a break-in period. As you shoot them, limbs can settle in the pockets, especially strings and cables tend to stretch out. So what we're going to do is kind of show you the initial setup, what we've done, and then go through and we're going to double check this bow to make sure it's still tuned and accurate for Martin. So that way as he gets out and starts dialing this thing in, getting his sight marks and checking broadheads, that he's not going to be fighting any issues this summer. Usually when I bring a bow back in, I want to put it in the vise. The first thing I'm going to check is kind of the level here. A lot of times your center serving on these strings can slip, slide. As you pull a bow, it actually doesn't pull straight back. You actually kind of pull up at an angle. And a lot of times this center serving can tend to shift or move after so many arrows. How many arrows do you think you put through the bow so far? 100, okay.
Yeah.
So usually 100's a good starting point. And it depends on the quality of the strings and cables from the factory. There's some companies that actually make really good factory quality strings and cables. Other companies, not so much. So usually 100's a pretty decent benchmark. Usually we kind of shoot for that 200 mark for most guys, but let's go through and double check it and kind of see where we're sitting. First thing I want to check is just make sure the level's pretty good on the bow. Make sure we haven't had any shifting with our knock point here, because the level's pretty critical on these. So what we're going to do is this Hamsky rest that we have installed here has this little down cable. And in order to kind of check that, we're just going to loosen this. We're going to slide this up. It's going to allow the rest to lift to the full position. So when Martin gets the full draw, this is where the rest's going to lift to. It stops in that position. And now I'm able to put a T-square on, or some guys like to use levels. And we're just going to kind of check the level, make sure everything looks good and clean there. And then if that looks good, what we're going to do is we're going to have Martin shoot through paper. Paper tuning is a great starting point. It's not everything. A lot of guys, I think, overemphasize that. But it is a great starting point to ensure that the bow and rest is giving us proper, what we call arrow delivery. We just want that bow and arrow to be firing as accurate as possible. And so we're just going to double check a couple things here really quick and make sure that everything's still lining up properly. One thing on this particular bow, and this is one thing that guys that are maybe new or kind of inexperienced don't realize, is that every bow has different, what they call knock travel. And with the Prime system, especially this inline, it uses what they call a center grip. The grip's kind of centered in the riser, which I'm a big fan of. That means that if you were to take from the axle to axle of the bow and divide that by 2, the true center point of the bow is actually right here in the throat of the grip. The reason I like that is the bow feels like a really natural extension from your body as you're aiming on target, and it does create a better balanced bow. You don't have too much weight above or below the grip, so the bow's more naturally balanced. But because of that, it actually needs to tune a little bit knock high. So if you were to come and look at the T-square, you can see the 0 line here, and you can see how high we are above that 0 line. And I get a lot of guys that tune bows at home, or they maybe have experience with different models or different brands. Just one thing to keep in mind is every bow does tune a little different. I don't mind if it sits a little knock high, if that's where the bow wants to deliver that arrow, as long as I have good arrow flight and good broadhead flight. I've had bows in the past that have actually had to tune knock low. I had a bow years ago. I actually wanted to tune an 1/8 knock low. And at first, I didn't like it. It kind of messed with me, but man, after I tuned the bow, got it set up, I could still fire a fixed blade broadhead to 80 yards. So, when it comes to center shot and level, there's kind of a standard that everybody tries to work off of, which is, level here, 13/16 on center shot. And that's a great starting point, but one thing to kind of keep in mind is that not every bow wants to be set and tuned that way. So if it needs to be shifted up or down on the nocking point, or maybe your center shot needs to be shifted a little left or right, that's okay. If the arrow is delivered well and the broadheads fly correctly, don't let that affect you or affect your confidence. So, but I like the level. That's right where my prime tuned in at, pretty much the same level there, so a little bit high. One way to kind of fix that on these primes, a lot of guys will get this bow, go home, tune it, and call me and go, hey, I'm getting a knock low tear, and they keep everything level. So kind of the trick with this particular model that I tell guys to do is, one, run a little bit knock high, which is okay. Two, you can take a couple twists out of this cable right here. That's affecting the starting position of the cam timing. And then third, and this is actually directly from Prime, some of their engineers that I've talked to about this particular bow, is what they call tiller tuning. So on some of these, we've actually had to take out either a half or a full twist of turn out of this limb bolt and leave the top limb bolt full. You know, a lot of guys don't like to do that. They think there's something wrong with it, but if that's what the bow wants to get proper arrow delivery, then I have no problem doing it. But yeah, let's tighten that rest cord back down, and then we're going to have Martin run it through paper here and kind of see where we're looking. So with these Hamskea rests, these are really called limb driven. So we have a cable that runs from the rest down to the limb of the bow. And there's a couple of things I want guys to kind of watch out for. Is number one, as you shoot, this cable will have a tendency to stretch out a little bit. So if I tap this cable here, and you can watch the rest bounce as I tap, that is too much slack or too much play. We want this rest to be a little bit tighter down. So as I tap the cable, the rest doesn't bounce up and down. So over time, if you get a new rest like this from Hamskea or any limb driven, as the cable starts to work itself in, stretch out a little bit, if you start to see that bounce, just go ahead and tighten it up. Hamskea has this really cool new dampening system here that acts like a shock absorber. It's worked really well this year. So as you tighten, this will kind of stretch out just a little bit, and that's what it's designed to do. So I'm just going to take this, pull it down, create a little bit more tension. Much better. So see how I can tap the cable, rest, we don't get any movement there. And then once I've kind of got this cable broken in where I don't think it's stretching or moving anymore, on some of mine I've actually taken some of this 3D serving from BCY, and I'll actually serve these pieces in, and it just kind of reinforces where I want that cable tension to sit. So I have this clamp here, which I like, I trust them, they've been pretty solid, but putting a couple extra pieces of serving I think is just a backup, especially mechanical failures. I tell guys all the time, if I fail because of me, that's bow hunting. I've had to learn the hard way, but if I fail because of something mechanical or equipment wise, it drives me crazy. So Martin just kind of mentioned that a guy had messaged him, said he was kind of maybe fighting his prime inline with this rest on here. And one of the tricks I just want to kind of bring up really quick is the position of where you're tying your down cable to the limb. So Prime provides a little part that actually it's a little round bushing here that you can actually tie this to that part. But there's a lot of factors with a limb driven rest that guys maybe haven't caught onto this concept yet, is that there is still timing that we need to adjust with this rest. It's a matter of telling the rest when to lift and able to fall. And what you're really doing with a limb driven rest is it's the positioning from this cable to the axle. And there's a couple of variables there, and the biggest one is usually draw length. The longer your draw length is, it's changing that rest and telling the rest to lift and fall. And then the other is the actual limb style of the bow. Some of these newer bows are getting a lot of arc as you draw that limb curls in really, really far. And sometimes that's too much movement for a limb driven. So if you're starting to fight some issues with maybe some vertical, if it's a vertical shift, what I want you guys to try at home is take this cable and start to move it farther away from the axle, closer to the limb pocket, and just move it 1/8 inch at a time. And if you start to see it affects and helps clean up some of that vertical travel. That's what you're doing, is you're basically telling the rest to lift and fall at a different timing point there. And then on this particular bow, I do get a lot of messages. A lot of guys are asking about the knock right tear out of them. And it's not every bow, but it is, I would probably say 40% that we hear of. But what Prime has done this year, which is really neat, is these spacers. And when you buy a new bow, they actually come with the spacers. When we set up a bow here at Wilde Arrow and we go through to tune it initially, we are determining what spacer it needs from the factory. But from the factory, they have two spacers that are on the side, and they both have two dots on the side of the spacer. And that's kind of the neutral position. So if you were to get a bow right out of the box from the factory, it would have a 2-dot spacer here and a 2-dot spacer here. If you're fighting a knock right tune, what you need to do is swap those spacers out. And what you'll do with that is you'll press the bow, you're going to loosen the axle, you don't need to take it all the way out. And with the extra spacers they provided, they have a thicker one and a thinner one. And what we want to do is put the thicker spacer on the shelf side of the bow and the smaller spacer on the cable guard or the sight side of the bow. And what we're going to do is shift this cam a couple thousandths to the right, and what that does is it makes this limb react stiffer during the shot, and it should help clean up and fix some of those knock right tears. So yeah, depending on what you're seeing with your tuning, if it's up and down, we kind of touched on the cable, the knocking point, and then the rest positioning of the down cable to the limb. If you're fighting more of a left and right issue, it's either spacers on the axle, or Prime does have this tunable flex guard system here. So with this flex guard, every time you draw this bow, this system will flex in to reduce torque and side load. There's a set screw on the side. You can loosen or tighten that depending on what your tear is doing through paper. So Prime's provided us a lot of tools on this bow to be able to kind of fine tune it. Like if we're up, down, left, and right, they're giving us enough in the bow system to be able to make every single bow tune and shoot how we want. But keep in mind that no two bows are alike. We could take the exact same bow that Martin's has here right out of the box, and it might want to tune a little bit different based off of the limb deflection. There's so many stack tolerances from the pockets, the limbs, rockers, all the way out. So you might have two bows that are identical bows but that tune completely different. So Prime's just giving us enough features with these to be able to, for our job, to be able to fine tune them and get them to deliver the arrow exactly how we need them to. We talked about the Hamsky rest. This rest works exceptionally well in the bow, but what we didn't really touch on is the sight that we got Martin running here. So this is just a true ball. I think it's called the AccuStat. It's just a slider sight. But what a lot of guys are doing is converting them over to the UltraView scope. These have been really popular for us this year. A lot of guys love them. When you buy the scope assembly, you do have to buy an adapter rod. They usually run about 20-25 bucks. But when you convert this over to the UltraView, there's just a lot of cool features with this. It comes with 3 different level bubbles, and it does have a sight light system on here that you can get it to illuminate your pin. You can adjust the brightness up or down. And then you can actually illuminate just the bubble too if you want. So you can press and hold this for 3 seconds and let go. So, for guys that are hunting in, dark canopies or ground blinds, I do a lot of ground blind hunting. Man, it makes it really nice. And Mark made a good point, like, that early morning, late evening for states where you can use it, it's a game changer. So for states where you cannot use the light system, you can actually pop this out of what they call the cartridge or the housing, and it just has an insert that goes in that doesn't have any light attachments to it. But it's a great little scope for guys. Single pins for a lot of us Western guys are getting more and more popular every year. So once Martin gets his sight tape calibrated, you can be accurate to 100 plus yards out of these things. So quiver obviously is kind of a personal preference. We like to run a lot of tight spots. They're just durable, lightweight. They have the adjustable gripper, which guys love. Great warranty on them. If you break them, tight spot fixes them pretty much. So great little quiver. And then last but not least would be the stabilizer system. So this is one thing that I feel like a lot of new bow hunters getting into the sport don't really understand the concept, understand the value of what a stabilizer should be doing. But when I draw my bow, the first thing I look for is I hate fighting any left or right balance. And most bows nowadays, by the time you've installed the rest, your sight, and your quiver, you have all the weight that is shifted up and to the side. And so the bow kind of gets top heavy. And I see guys all the time, they'll draw and they're fighting their bubble to go to the middle. And, you know, 40 yards and under, if you're canted a little bit, your misses will be pretty minimal. But when you get stretching out farther ranges, to be able to balance the bow is really critical. So what we like to run on these primes is this bee stinger counter slide. And we really like this low mount position, but because of all the accessories that went up to the right, the stabilizer comes down and to the left. So it really creates a well-balanced bow, but without adding a ton of bulk and affecting the packability. But with stabilizers, what I want guys to kind of look for, or something to try, is number one is when you first draw your bow, to make sure the bow is balanced really well left and right. You should have minimal fight to get that bubble to go to the middle. And then the next thing is reading your pin float on target. If you feel like the pin is moving really fast or erratic, it's really hard to get in the middle. That's a combination of stabilizer muscles in your body you have to develop, but the stabilizer on the bow will help assist that. So if you get on target and you have a lot of float or a lot of movement, with this particular model, we can loosen these 4 screws and shift and slide this out in front, or we can actually add more weight out here too. So, but yeah, kind of as a whole, man, that's it's a solid setup, all good accessories. And, you know, for guys that are looking to get a new bow or build something new, like the better equipment you start off with, usually the end result's easier to achieve. So, you know, you don't have to go out and spend a ton of money, but the better equipment, like what we have here, makes that job a lot easier. Okay, so there we're a little knock left. So what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna have you shoot one more shot, make sure that the bow is repeating how we want, and then if we're left, what we're gonna probably end up doing is actually loosening this flex guard. So we're gonna take a little bit of tension out, it's gonna allow it to flex in more, and then we'll try it again. But whenever we're paper tuning, I always like to shoot multiple shots to make sure that, you know, as shooters, we feel like we're doing the same thing every time. But you'd be surprised of how there's just little inconsistencies that you're not maybe fully fine-tuned on. So usually I like to shoot 1 to 2 shots. If the bow repeats, I want to tune the bow to your hand and make sure that if that's where your natural input, that's where you feel comfortable, that I'm tuning that bow to what feels the best for you. Just lightly let those fingers curl. The softer that front hand is, the more relaxed, better you're going to be. Yeah, so we're left. So 2 shots in a row, we're left. So let's make a tuning adjustment to the bow. Okay. Let's see where we put this. So. Very pushy. We had Martin shoot through paper twice. Both of them were pushing knock left. And that could just be the bow settling, or maybe just, you know, the way that Martin's kind of getting into the bow. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen this flex guard out here. So we're just going to do a couple twists out. And you will see sometimes by just adjusting this, it's going to move our shift, our left and right through paper there. So now that we loosen that, we're going to have Martin try this again and see what we get. So what we're going to end up doing is I'm actually going to play with those spacers we were talking about on the top. I'm going to shift the top cam to the left just a little bit. And let's see, by moving those spacers, because there is a point where you don't want to back out that flex guard too far. Like, it has movement, but obviously you don't want to get the threads too far out there. So let's put it in the press, shift a spacer, and then try it through paper again. So we pressed it, we've got tension off the cables. I've loosened this a little bit, and then you can see I've just created just enough gap where I got a little bit of wiggle in that cam. And then we're gonna pop these spacers out and see if we can't shift this cam to the left. We wanna shift the cam towards the direction of the tear and see if we can't get that knock left out of it. So this one we did have already installed the 3-in-1 dots. I don't know if you guys can see that there, but this was thicker and this was thinner. So we're going to go back to the standard factory, the 2-in-2, which they'll kind of, we're only going to shift the cam a couple thousandths to the right, because with that paper tune, we only need a little bit of movement there. So here's the factory spacers. That's usually what ships with it. These are equal in size. So it's going to shift this cam to the left a couple thousandths. So we're going to put these back on the axle, tighten them back down, and then we'll try it through paper again. And I think this should do the trick as far as getting that left hair cleaned out of it for us. Yeah, we're really close there. So let's have you fire one more. Now for how close we are there, then we're going to fine tune it with that flex guard. So if we're to the right, we're going to tighten that flex guard. But we're really, really close on that paper tune there. So we're still left just a hair. So
The same.
yeah, but it's got cleaner. So we're better. We're definitely better. You can see how the tear size reduced from here by shifting that cam.
That was our first one.
Yep, so this is where we started.
Yeah.
And so making a couple adjustments, we're walked it in. So I'm gonna look at the spacers on bottom and maybe shift everything.
All right, so finally we're starting to look a lot better.
Yeah. This was our last shot right here. I like that, looks really clean. You can see from the initial setup that we've done for Martin, that bow, something has shifted or settled, or maybe just the way that you kind of got familiar with the grip of the bow. We had to make some changes. So one thing I just want to educate guys on, kind of one of the purposes of doing this video with Martin today, is when you guys get a brand new bow setup, you go through that initial setup, after you run a couple hundred arrows, come double check your bow. I mean, if you guys, especially all of our customers that buy bows from Wilde Arrow, after you run a couple hundred shots through it, bring it in. Let's just come back and double check the paper tune. If there's any fine tune adjustments we need to make, this is some of the things that guys maybe don't, especially new guys that don't know that they need to do that. And then they get out shooting broadheads and struggle a little bit.
All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I've been shooting the bow for a couple weeks and it's been an awesome one. I've only shot Hoyts so far, and always like those. Performance-wise, we haven't talked about that, but I've gotten more performance out of this. The Prime's at 80 pound, this Prime Inline 5, and 35 inches axle to axle. I've been shooting it at 298 with a 450 arrow.
It's awesome.
And
nice.
Before, the fastest I've gotten is 280, 285, I believe. So really good specs. So I've really liked it so far. Now I got TAC coming up. Guys, if you need to come in and get your bow looked at before TAC or before the season, now is the time. Earlier the better. Jeremiah was saying, like, they get an influx of bows this time of year. So being proactive with that is the best thing you can do. So come into Wilde Arrow if you're local in Utah. And you also have a program where you can ship a bow here, right?
Not ship a bow. What we do have a lot of guys that do is they'll fly in for what we call the Wilde Arrow Experience.
Okay.
And what they do is we set a time aside, we charge per hour, but we'll basically bring a guy in and go through the same setup process here. But we get a lot of phone calls of guys see us on YouTube working with guys like you and go, hey, my shop doesn't do any of that, or they just don't trust their setup on their equipment. So yeah, for guys that are out of state that want to schedule Wilde Arrow Experience, just give us a call here at the shop. You can ask for me, Jeremiah, or Cody Jones. He's kind of my right hand man here. So yeah, if you want the Wilde Arrow Experience, give us a call and we can get you in here.
Yeah, that's cool, because honestly, rather than just shipping your bow here, being here, there's so much more like conversation that goes in between, like in a video here, like in between shots. There's so much conversation and knowledge that they can share and tips they can give you to really make you feel comfortable with your setup. I know coming here and doing this the past few times, it's really increased my confidence and my knowledge of my setup going into each season.
Give yourself enough time, come in early, let's get the bow set up and tuned the right way, and it gives you plenty of time to go out and fine tune, dial in, make sure broadheads are flying correctly, and then confidence with your equipment is huge, so you don't want to be second guessing your bow when you're out in the field.
For sure. Hey, well, thank you. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, you bet, man.
Okay, we'll catch you guys on the next video. Also, if you want to shoot Total Archery Challenge, Park City, Utah, I'm doing a giveaway right now. It's only valid through the next week. So if you're watching this now, get entered at peaksequipment.com. Every $20 spent is an entry. If you're out of town, they will fly you out. You get your travel, your pass, and your stay for the night covered. So a pretty sweet opportunity to come shoot. You're gonna shoot with me. It's the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation course, all elk targets. I think they're getting sold out on tickets. So if you haven't gotten the chance to get yourself a ticket, this could be a good way to get entered. So hop on that if you can. And we'll catch you on the next video.